So today we're going to give a little video on solar power, battery storage, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So several years ago, I invested in solar in the house, and we put a ton of panels up, as many as actually we were allowed by the utility company, because we use a lot of electricity for various things in the house, espresso machines, 3D printers, so on and so forth. And I really wanted to try to generate, all the electricity that we use. So they were 285 watt panels back then, several years ago. I'll look up the exact years and give some graphs on how much we produced and stuff. But 285 watt panels, and we put an array on the back side of the house right after we replaced the roof of 54 panels. So we've got 54 285 watt panels up there. And then about a year or two ago, we got a second electric car, and so also put in an electric heated driveway. We live in Michigan and have a really steep driveway, and so it was getting really dangerous. And so when we replaced the driveway, we put in electric heat, and so our electric usage went up even more. And so we came back with the new, kind of more efficient panels. You can see there's 7 of them across the top there, and then there's 10 on the other side of the house. That don't get quite as good a sun as this south-facing roof does for us, but they do really well. And those are 405 watt panels. So in total, we've got the original 54 panel array plus the new 71 solar panels. And you can do the math on 285 times 54 plus 17 times 405 to get kind of the theoretical production that they would create. And that's great. We are our own power company. We're producing a ton of electricity all day long, all year long, even through the winter. The colder that it gets outside, the more efficient they are. So we produce a lot of electricity here, and that feels great. When we put the second arrays in, we also hooked it up to battery backup storage. So I'll show a little bit of that. The big thing here, like a lot of these systems, they all kind of independently work really well, and the problems that we've had have been easy to get solved. We used a local Michigan company I'll link to in the comments. So even like warranty issues with replacing inverters over the years, like all those things have been fine. The big issue is that when you put the systems together, then they kind of fall apart. Like they don't really talk to each other well. You get confused between this app versus that app, and I'm going to show all that today and just show where my frustrations are. Also, some of these companies that we're dealing with are relatively new, and so they're rolling out new systems that aren't necessarily keeping up with kind of the transferring data and stuff. So I'm gonna show all of that today. But we are producing a lot of electricity, which is great. We are storing it to battery. We're able to use that. We've used it during power outages. We've got about a 4 millisecond cutover, so that's awesome. So here we go. Before we go in the house, I'm just going to show the side of the utility wall here. We've got a pretty small utility room down there, and all these services come outside. But for the original array of 54 panels, they are separated into 2 inverters. These are solar edge inverters, as you can see. They used to be identical, but this older model, one of them failed, and then under warranty, it's a good thing I can say, under warranty they came out and replaced it with kind of the new style. So we've got one of each style. Each one has its own sort of power shutoff service there. We've got a rapid shutoff switch, and then we've got this big honkin' on off. And so when we, if we want to just like completely shut off the grid, we can come out here and just swing that thing down to off, and then we're going to be entirely on solar or backup battery power. Yeah, so that's what the outside of this looks like. And now we're down in the basement. We're going to go into our teeny tiny utility room. So come on in here. We'll see if we can't get what we need to on camera. So the first thing I want to point out is this like honkin' transfer box that they put in, which is cool. It's just this incredibly large, kind of ridiculously sized toggle switch that switches us from solar. So when this is up here, we are connected to the inverters and the battery backup, and everything is controlled by the Solarc device I'll show you in the back. And then we can switch it down to completely off or down to grid. And when it's swung all the way down here, it's like none of this solar stuff ever happened. We're back to just kind of a normal grid setup. And let me see if I can probably open this up just to show you kind of what that looks like on the inside. It's just literally a huge, massive transfer switch. Okay. All right, so that's that. And then everything else, just normal panels in here. We're going to go back into what is really the brains of this entire operation. All of the solar, the new solar array and the battery pack is all back here and controlled by the Solarc. This is, what we kind of refer to as our fabrication room. It's got some 3D printers in it and stuff. But if we come in here, the first thing I want to show you is this Solarc inverter system. And this really is the brains of everything. So it kind of serves two functions. One, it is the inverter that the new solar array goes to. So the 17 panels, the 405 watt panels, they come directly into here. I can kind of open this up and kind of show you what's going on the inside there. So you can, see all the different connections. We've got several different utility lines coming in. But yeah, the new panel comes in here directly via DC. And then the 54 panels, the other panels, they go through their inverters. And when they do charge the battery, it does this weird sort of DC to AC to DC reconversion back. So we don't get the most efficient battery charging off of those, but we do get a very efficient electricity usage in the house and for net metering. Okay, so if we look at the screen here, and this begins to kind of show you some of my frustrations when you start combining these systems together, right? Because the information you look at in any individual place, you have to do a little like math and conversion, and you have to remember how it all works, right? So right now this is telling me that we're generating 2.4, about 2.5 kilowatts from the solar array. That's just the new panels, right? So that's just the 17 405 watt panels and what they're currently doing. It's also telling me that 8 kilowatts are going into the battery. So obviously right there, that doesn't make sense. Where's the extra nearly 6 kilowatts of generation coming from? Well, clearly that is the other array of 54 panels that this thing just doesn't know much about, other than it sees the power flowing out to the battery system. This is also telling me that the house is using 0 kilowatts, which makes no sense because my house is using a lot of electricity right now and I've got my lights on. But it is telling me that we are not pulling anything from the grid currently. Okay, so what makes up for that? Well, let's go over here to the home grid battery system. And this is a very cool system. It's a stackable system. So each one of these panels is a stackable, nearly 4 kilowatt hours of storage. I think it's about 3.8. There's 8 of them in a full stack. You can actually run these in series together. So you could go all the way down to just having one. And I do recommend, if you're going to put any solar in, get at least the smallest battery you can, because then you'll be able to fully utilize your solar when there's a power outage. If you don't have a battery, it turns it off, and even if you're generating electricity, you can't use it. So that's awful. But let's look at what the home grid system is doing here. We see that 8.5 kilowatts of input power coming into the battery system. It's 98% state of charged, and we ran it all the way down to probably nearly 30% last night. So we're nearly fully recharged. As soon as this ticks up to 100%, all of that energy is just going to backfeed into the grid. And so the difference here, this 8.6 and what our house is using, which we can't see here and we can't see here currently, is just being made up by solar. So we're generating so much solar power right now that it's satisfying all of the demands in the house and also feeding 8.5 kilowatt directly into the battery system. That's what's going on. So let's jump into some other apps and see if we can see that. I'm going to try to walk you through sort of my understanding of how this system works. And I'm not an expert. I'm not an electrician. I just kind of maybe I know enough to be dangerous, if anything. But I've got this chart here. Combined solar. We talked about there's 71 panels in total. Theoretical capacity is over 22 kilowatts, right? So we've got our original array of 54 panels there in solar array number 1, and then the 17 new panels in solar array number 2. The panels in the first array are split between 2 inverters, and not equally even. One's completely full and there's room left on the second one, but it was too big for one inverter, so they originally put in 2 inverters that we saw outside. They convert the DC power to AC, and historically they just kind of connected it to the grid, right? So like if the house needed it, it would use it, and if it didn't, it would just backfeed onto the grid for net metering. And so the dark lines here are the DC power paths, and then the red lines are the AC power paths. Then when we added the second solar array of the 17 panels, that needed its own inverter, so they go on to the Solarc inverter that we showed you. And DC flows directly from the solar array into that inverter, and that's why it can pump DC power directly into the battery stack, and that's our most efficient way to charge the home grid battery stack there, which is the 38.4 kilowatt hours or so of storage. If we do have to charge from the like, let's say the grid was down and we had to charge from all of our panels, that works. That inverter, the SolarArc inverter, just sees the other solar power as AC power, just as it would see the grid power. So it doesn't know the difference at all. And so it would end up converting it back to DC power, and so we'd get even more loss there, but it would charge the battery really, really fast. But typically what happens is, the direct current from the second solar array charges the battery, and then the 54 panels, they either get used by what the house is using in AC power or flow back to the grid. So what we're going to bring in here is like, what visibility do we have of this system? So we've got this Solar Edge app. That was the, before the second array and, the battery backup and everything. That was the only thing I really used. I've got the Solar Grid app, or Solar Edge app, and it can see the panels. It can see the health of every panel, how much they're generating, and it can see the inverters, and it kind of adds them up. And so if we go into the Solar Edge app here, you can see right now it's generating about 8.5 to 9 kilowatts. It produced about 17 today. In total, 102 megawatt hours, right? So we've had this system in place since about 2016. And so we've generated quite a lot of power with it. It shows, kind of yearly data for the last 5 years. So if we look here, we can see yearly and quarterly kind of power generation that's been going up over time, as you would expect it to. That app really only gets us part of the information, doesn't it? So if we go back to our graph here, we got a SolarArc app as well, that is connected to the inverter. That's really the brains of the whole operation here. So you'd think you'd be able to get everything you need out of that, but you really can't, because it's not aware of anything that's going on in that original array. Remember, it just sees that power coming into it as AC power, just like the grid. In fact, it doesn't look any different to the SolarArc system than the grid does itself. And so when we go into the SolarArc app, here's what we can see. This is the SolarArc app. And I'm very underwhelmed by this thing. I mean, you can see the power flow is all zeros right now. I've got information and generation, but it's got load and photovoltaic, but of course it only knows about part of my array, so that's not super useful to me. And a lot of the stuff that's coming off of load is really coming from my other arrays. So the generation section is kind of useless. When I go into the equipment, it shows me some stats about the amount of electricity it's generated today, but again, that's only for part of it. And for some reason, everything in PowerFlow just shows zeros, even though it's the same information that you see on the front of the SolarArc panel. It doesn't seem to be updated. Now, they did just recently update this app, and there was a data migration that I've heard they have some trouble with. I've reached out to my company, and they just keep saying, well, your system is one of the ones that hasn't fully migrated the data. This has been going on for weeks, so very frustrating. All right, we're back in here. I just looked through some of the apps that I've got access to, and you can kind of see where some of the information doesn't line up, and it's just a little confusing. Even for me, it's been a couple years since I've really looked at this stuff super closely. But what's happened in that time is, state of charge has gotten, nearly to 100% here, and it's kind of backing off. So you can see it's pulling in 4.8 kilowatts, and we're generating quite a lot more than that now. And so you can see the nearly 5 kilowatts going into the battery system, but in addition to that, we're exporting over 8 kilowatts right now onto the grid. And again, this is only showing 3.75 because as that sun is coming up this morning, this afternoon, that's what our 17 405 watt panels are creating. And then the excess, between that and the nearly 16, 17 kilowatts that's going on here in total is coming from the other 54 panels. Okay, there's one more thing I wanted to show you in the utility room. I'm gonna go over to this panel that runs through the backup battery and show you some of the circuit breakers. One of the cool things that the Savant system had that was the reason we put this in the first place, to sort of get a little bit more control and understanding of what's going on with this complicated system, is they've got these modules that you can plug into your electric panel that'll actually show you live readouts of how much power the circuit breakers are drawing. So like in this case, we've got a projector and some outlets in our AV closet for our media center. kitchen fridge and kids outlets. This is really cool because you can see real time how much they're drawing. You can go into the app, manage all that, and turn them on and off inside the app. The real downside, I was excited about the system at first, but once we started putting it in, we realized that, for each 2 breakers, it takes up double the space. So this is controlling these 2 breakers, this is controlling these 2 breakers. So you lose half the space in the panel just to get this awareness, and that just wasn't going to work. And so very cool functionality, but just practically you can't lose that much space. I'd love to have all my breakers have that kind of visibility and control, but it doesn't work. There's another system out called Span, which looks amazing, an incredible product. I'd love to rip this out and put Span in, but Span doesn't integrate with HomeGrid and maybe some of my other systems. So you get the message. This is where it really comes down to with all this stuff. Independently, every one of the things is awesome and works great and is exciting, but practically speaking, you've got to put a few vendors together and a few different things together, and over time, the thing you put in a few years ago might not make sense for the next thing you're going to put in. And once you put all this stuff in, it's a hodgepodge mess and almost impossible to understand what's going on at any given moment real time, and very frustrating in that regard. So hopefully the industry catches up here, creates some standards, some APIs, and really gets all these things integrated together. So no matter what different parts and pieces you're buying, you can get a better system at the end of the day. That's what I'm looking forward to, for sure.
The solution to sort of all of this dead spot monitoring was supposed to be the Savant system. So we put this Savant system in, which has, yet again, its own app. So a third app to control our solar and battery. But the upside was supposed to be that it knows about just about everything. Let's take a look at that. Okay, in Savant, we can see definitely more information. We see that the combined solar panel arrays are generating 15 to 16, it looks like there's somebody at the front door too. About 15 kilowatts there. And if we go in, we can kind of see when it's using battery, when it's using grid, and when solar is producing over time, which is really cool. You can see how when the sun comes up, the battery gets charged, and we put electricity onto the grid, and then when the sun goes down, we either pull from the grid a little bit, or eventually we kind of switch over to battery. We're trying to get this dialed in so that we're completely off grid, but you can kind of see that usage pattern here, which is pretty cool, to be honest. But it doesn't really have everything that you want it to have, even still. Like if we bounce back up here and look at the home screen, you can see that Savant shows that the house is consuming 0 watts, which is just not true.
Well, there you have it. That's a quick tour of the solar and battery setup that we've got here at the house. So it's great in that we're producing a lot of clean energy. I feel great about that. But at the same time, it's super frustrating because I just want a simple system that works. And when you've got these, multiple systems all kind of working together and 3 different apps to go into to try to figure out what's going on, and not any of them has all of the information that I'd really like to see. So, I mean, if you know more about this, you have any suggestions for me on how to put these different types of systems together from Solar Edge and SolarArc and HomeGrid and Savant or whatever other system out there, Span would be great if it worked with everything. If you have ideas on how to put this together better that I'd be able to use, please let me know in the comments, because it is frustrating to invest this kind of money in setup and then not be able to use it in a way that kind of makes sense. So I do hope, that I think it's early in this industry, and obviously this stuff's really important for our future. So I hope that these vendors and these manufacturers can figure out how to work together better, so that kind of no matter what different panels you have or inverters you have and battery systems you have, you can bring it all together in one experience that really works well for the end user. So that's my hope. But meanwhile, we are doing it. We're producing a lot of clean energy, and that's awesome. So see you later.